Testing 1, 2. Are we live? There we go. Alright, welcome. I'm Miryafa, and I'm creating this video to talk about my commander cube. Recently I read a Reddit post where a user by the name of DH has mentioned that they hadn't seen too many YouTube videos on commander cube and were interested in seeing more. So, let me pull this up. This here is my list on Cube Cobra. I've got a 480 card cube, and it follows the rules of Commander, no trade secrets or Grizzlebrand, but with a few additions that aren't legal in Commander per se, like Sovereign's Realm, the conspiracy that lets you start with a hand size of 5 and essentially play cards face down as lands. The Warmonger, a hero card that I added to help push aggressive strategies. The way we play it is a permanent that starts on the battlefield, can be vindicated, in which case it goes to the graveyard, and follows all the normal rules for a permanent, but its ability can be activated at any time. So it's a free Trumpet Blast plus haste for the team, which has been powerful, but at least it is not. At least it hints at you to go into an aggressive type of deck and rewards you for going wide a bit, which is part of the goal for my cube. I have had, following the lessons of others that have created multiplayer cubes before, I have tried to push aggressive strategies in my cubes because multiplayer by default punishes aggressive strategies, and so I've put a lot of work into making something like, say, an EDH deck with Perforos as its commander and a token strategy viable. So I go into a lot of that here in this Reddit post that I have about my cube. It's a primer that I direct people to when they when I comment on new posts about people asking about EDH cubes on Reddit, and you can check it out just by Googling this title here. That said, to talk about my cube a little bit, it is a 480 card EDH cube. None of the commanders that we draft, none of the commanders that we're going to play with are in the cube, except coincidentally, like Dragonlord Ojutai is a gold card that you can draft and put in your deck. But instead, what we do is we draft our decks, and then after we're done drafting our decks, people can choose any commander in the entire game to be the commander for their deck. I've got a few proxied up for people to choose from. If I don't have it on hand, they can pull up an image on their phone or whatever and use that instead. So, for example, if I do something like draft Giver of Runes and Fibblethip and Viscera Seer, I don't have to search for some Esper card, which there aren't even any Esper cards in the cube, as my commander. I can just say, okay, I want Aloro, Ageless Ascetic, to be my commander once I'm done drafting. And I like this approach because what it allows us to do is to really look at the cards in the packs on their own merit without considering, like, well, I have a green-red legendary, I can't really afford to take this black card unless I happen to find a commander that is red and black and green later on down the line. I think that when you draft the commander first, or as part of the normal EDH cube draft, you really put people on rails and limit their picks. And I know some people have talked about this, feeling this effect from their cubes, where they do this thing. And that said, I'm not against doing that by default. I'm sure that some people enjoy playing that way, and I don't. Hey, I mean, whatever floats your boat, I'd say that's totally acceptable. Just for me personally, I like the way we do it, where we draft cards first and then pick commanders second. It was the reason I originally thought of doing it this way was because this is how a friend of mine does World of Warcraft TCG Cube. And if you've never played World of Warcraft, think Hearthstone, but better. Sorry, I mean Hearthstone, but with instants. And quests, which are essentially lands. So in Hearthstone, you also, in WoW TCG, you also choose a commander, quote unquote. And the way that we played the WoW Cube was we would draft first and pick the commander second. So that's what inspired me to do it this way for Magic. A couple other notes about my cube. We draft 4 packs of 15 and then build 50 card decks. That requires me to have a minimum 480 cards for an 8-player draft, which is why I have a 480 card cube. I could have more cards, but the reason that I chose not to, and to essentially do the equivalent of a 360 cube for 1v1, is because what I found is that while blue and black and green have a plethora of good options for cards, red and white really don't. The best cards in these colors are fantastic. Cards that you would want to go into these colors for. But the average cards are not, I think, not as good as the average cards in these other colors. So, in order to sort of mitigate that effect and to bring the power floor and ceiling as close together as possible, I've made the cube as small as possible. So there's, you know, the smallest possible range between bad and good for red and white, and essentially, right, the average card in red and white is better because I have fewer red and white cards in my cube. Okay, and I'm also going to mention I've got 5 non-basic lands in each guild, in addition to, you know, colorless, quote-unquote, non-basic lands that can go into any commander's deck. I have in total that gives me 15% of my cube being mana fixing from lands alone. That is on the high end for cubes, but I want that much fixing so that basically to encourage people to go into multiple colors, because of course, right, when we play EDH, we generally, I think the average deck is going to have 3 colors in their commander, if not more, maybe less. You know, there's a few commanders that are 5 color, and there's a few commanders that are monocolor, but on average, I think you see 3 color commanders the most. And so I want people to be drafting 3 color decks on average, and so that's why I have so many lands. By contrast, I tried to have a low number of gold cards. So I've got 4 gold cards for every guild. That is the most that I want in a guild. And part of that is that, you know, some guilds have really great gold cards. You know, Mirari's Wake and Avicen's Pilgrim are great Selesnya cards. By contrast, some guilds, yeah, I'm going to point out Rakdos. Actually, probably the signature guild, Boros, does not have a wealth of cards outside of the Boros Signet and Talisman of Conviction that I consider really strong cards in their guild. Nahiri, of course, is perfectly acceptable, but Planeswalkers in general, not that great in EDH. And then Aurelia, the War Leader, I think is a really is a perfectly acceptable finisher for a deck that's playing red and white. But I don't know if I would go into red and white just for Aurelia. It would depend on the pack. Yeah, I don't know if I'd go into the colors red and white for Aurelia. It would be dependent on my picks. So I limit myself to 4 gold cards. I might go down to 0 at some point, but I don't have, again, when I look at my red and white sections, I don't have cards that I'm just bursting to add to the cube right now that would take over the, let's see, 40, the 8 slots I would have to add to get rid of all the gold cards. And besides, some of these gold cards are great, right? Like Venser the Sojourner, fine payoff for a fine enabler for blink decks, and also makes creatures unblockable, which is great for aggressive decks. Thief of Sanity, a fun card. Consuming Aberration, a powerhouse in a Spellslinger deck, and also just a big creature. Yeah, there's a lot of fun to be had. So, all that said, let's go into a draft. I've got what I am starting to believe is a seeded draft because I've refreshed this page a few times. I imagine if you put this same string into your URL, you'll be able to draft the same packs with the same RNG. And that said, let's take a look at this here. Okay. So I'm not going to claim to be the greatest drafter in the world, or even the greatest drafter of EDH Cube in the world. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through this draft and highlight my, try and explain the way I think about cards when I'm drafting in this format where I can go into any colors and be guaranteed to be able to have a commander for those colors, right? So if I end up in 5 colors, then I can just say, well, all right, the first sliver is going to be my commander because that's a 5-color commander, and so essentially I'm not limited by colors. So Shieldred Whispering One, I think, just like 1v1, she's a great reanimation target. A fine card to play on 7 mana. She really puts the opponents under pressure to maintain a board position. That said, she hasn't seen very much play in my cube, and I think it's just it's possibly just luck, right? You play a 50-card deck, you don't see every card in your deck. That's normal. And normally when we play, we will do a draft and then play 2 games, possibly less, rarely more. So it's not like a normal 1v1 draft where you draft your deck and then you play 6 games with it. There's a lot of variance. Yeah, so Shieldred, fine card. But I will note that I don't really support stacks in my cube aside from Shieldred. So there's no Grave Pact, there's no Dictate of Erebos. And the reason is, again, because those cards make it very hard for opponents to maintain a board position, which again makes it hard for aggressive decks, decks that are trying to win through creature combat to execute their game plan. So basically I've got a lot of proactive cards and a lower number of defensive cards in my queue, in part because I expect that when someone pulls ahead and plays a bomb, that their 3 opponents together will work together to fight the person that's in the lead to prevent them from winning, at least as long as they are about to win or going to win. So the fact that essentially I have about, let's say, just for the sake of argument, that I have about 10% removal in my cube, the extra players make for extra removal, is the way I see it. And that theory comes from the lessons from tuning a multiplayer cube, which I've linked in my primer that I showed before. So okay, Erebos Bleak-Hearted, recently new addition from Theros Beyond Death. I like that he allows you to draw cards for free when creatures you control die. Essentially, I added him to try and support the aristocrats, the black aristocrats. But I'm not going to first pick him. Teferi's Protection. Some people think this card is the bee's knees. I basically see it as a fog with upside. I don't rate it particularly highly, but that said, of course, if you can set up a turn where you cast Teferi's Protection and then cast Wrath of God or Obliterate, which is not in my cube, but you know, you've got a one-sided board wipe, and that's one of the most powerful things you can do in EDH, I think. So, again, I don't think I would take Teferi's Protection out of these 3 cards, but Sylvan Library, I absolutely would. I like that it's cheap, I like that it draws 3 cards per turn for a while, and provides filtering after that. I think that's the best of these 4. Kega the Tide Star. As a 5/5 flyer, it has an acceptable body for combat, but it's really in here for the death ability, right? Because once you put Kega on the board, it's nerve-wracking for opponents to kill. Alright, Gearic Wildspeaker. 4 mana, untap 2 lands. It's perfectly acceptable. And I have actually a low number of Planeswalkers in my cube compared to what you might expect to see in a normal cube. There's approximately 1 to 1.5 per color, not including gold cards. And so, sorry, that comes back to Planeswalkers, right? Not being as good in EDH because you've got 3 opponents that can attack them. But I think he pulls his weight. He also contributes to one of the stronger archetypes in my cube, which is the ramp and card draw archetype, right? Essentially the blue-green Dirtle archetype. So another card, Kozilek the Butcher of Truth, is basically just a payoff for the ramp deck. I've got a few cards in here that cost 7+ that I see as ramp payoffs, and I haven't seen him cast too much. I did add him pretty recently. We'll see how he plays out. The cast trigger, of course, of drawing 4 cards is pretty great. Let's see. Reclamation Sage. This is probably a good time to talk about the mana curve of my cube. I've got an average converted mana cost of about 3.5 for my cube. The average converted mana cost for a 1v1 cube is usually 3.0 or less. The goal is to get the total average converted mana cost of non-land cards as low as possible so that people have the ability to do things during the early turns of the game. And so that's why I have Reclamation Sage in here over a more expensive bomby card like shoot, what's the tree folk that destroys a permanent? Advanced Search. I'm sure people are thinking about the top of their head, and I could have looked this up. Woodfall Primus, right? Woodfall Primus is a powerful card with reasonable stats and the persist ability, but I want people to have cards that they can play on turn 3, so Reclamation Sage gets included, or at least is in this pack, even though normally I would say a 2/1 is totally unacceptable stats for a creature in EDH. That said, just being a creature in green specifically, right, a color that has access to Beastmaster Ascension and Craterhoof, which are both in my cube, just being a creature is sometimes good enough. And that's why I have, say, Reclamation Sage here instead of Nature's Claim. Okay, so next card up, Phyrexian Arena. The much vaunted, some say Sacred Cow. I think it's a pretty good card. I'm not, I think, going to take it here over the Sylvan Library. Hangerback Walker. This is a card that I think other people value higher than I do. I don't like it very much for EDH, but it has a high rating on EDH Rec, and people draft it and put it in their deck, so it's in the cube. And then we have City of Ass, a gold gate. It comes no play tapped, and basically adds 1 mana of any color. So this is where I'm going to pause and note that compare City of Ass to Blood Crypt. Blood Crypt is fetchable, right? It comes into play untapped, essentially, if you want all the time in EDH. but the strength of City of Ass is that it is colorless. And one thing I didn't mention before was that in my cube we play with the color identity rule. So, right, you have a Esper commander, you can only put Esper cards in your deck, which means that City of Ass could go in an Esper deck, Blood Crypt could not, because of course it's got the red mana symbol on it. And so I think that makes City of Ass a higher pick than Blood Crypt at least. And actually I think it is I would probably take it over Sylvan Library and any of the cards before here. Then we have Nezahal Primal Tide, a great card. I tend to follow the maxim that when a card says whenever an opponent does something, it is better than a card that says whenever you do something. Like, so Phyrexian Arena draws you a card on each of your turns. Nezahal draws you a card whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell. I would expect Nezahal, a resolved Nezahal, to draw twice as many cards per round as a Phyrexian Arena would. And then, of course, 7/7 is acceptable stats. Just to talk about stats for a second, I go by the maxim, basically, that each of my 3 opponents is going to have 40 life, and they are not going to attack each other, which means that if I'm going to attack them down to 0, I have to be capable of doing 120 damage. Since in 1v1, you normally only have to deal 20 damage, well, that means I have to deal 6 times as much. And that means my creatures have to be 6 times as big. Or at least their power has to be 6 times as big. So, whereas a 2/2 is about the least amount of stats you want for a creature in 1v1, I think that, well, I'd even be generous, and normally I think a 6/6 is like the minimum amount of stats you want for a creature that you intend to attack your opponents to death to have in EDH. And so 7/7 just gets over that. And of course 12/12 is the equivalent of a 2/2 if you're just multiplying by 6. So that's where Kozilek comes in good. And that said, right, most creatures are not 12/12s in EDH. I think it more often comes down to what the battlefield looks like. And but the point is, if I'm looking for basically, right, if I'm looking at the vanilla test for a card for EDH, if it has less than 6 power and toughness, like Kega here, it has to have a pretty darn good ability to make up for the lack of stats. Same with Reclamation Sage. And so, anyway, also Nezahal, I think, is a great reanimation target. But again, reanimation hasn't seen too much play in my cube. Or actually, I don't think anyone... Yeah, actually, one or 2 people have drafted reanimation and done well. So there's so much for Nezahal. I think I would still take City of Ass. We have Evolving Wilds. It is, like City of Ass, a colorless fixer, but it only fixes 1 color. So it fixes any color, right? But I think I take City of Ass over that. Pongify, a great removal spell in my opinion. I was just talking about stats. A 3/3 with no evasion is not what I consider relevant. Even if it had evasion, a 3/3 is not what I consider to be relevant. So essentially this is Swords to Plowshares without the exile. 1 mana, destroy target creature. No real downside. I'll play it in any blue deck. And then we have Blood Crypt. I don't think I need to talk too much about this, but I'm going to take the city here. Alright, next pack. Windfall, powerful wheel effect. Of course, one of the ways to get ahead on to break parity on these cards is to ramp so that you have fewer cards in your opponent than your opponents when you cast this. This is admittedly a more, and then there's others of course, but the Admittedly, Windfall is a very powerful card to have in an EDH game. I have more wheels in my cube, like Time Twister, Wheel of Fortune, and so on. And I think decks that can really take advantage of those are really powerful decks. It's possible that I need to cut down on them, but the Windfall synergizes with graveyard themes and card draw themes, so I like having this effect in the cube. And that said, I would say it's the most powerful card I see in front of me. Go for the Throat, 1/1 removal, perfectly acceptable card, but not no better than 1/1. So Sakura Tribuilder, it's a ramp spell. I like ramp and card draw. As I said, I think it's a powerful archetype in my cube, but I'm probably not going to take it over Windfall. Though I would take it over either Go for the Throat or Grasp of Fate. Grasp of Fate, 3/1 removal, powerful white spell. Exploration, it's a ramp spell. It's just not a particularly good one unless you're doing a lot of card draw, like casting Mull Drifters and Wheels a fair bit. Deep Forest Hermit, I have this. Oh, actually, I'll also note that I have Exploration in here, both to support ramp, but also to support Enchantress, which I recently added support for, and to support Omnath, Locus of Rage, particularly in combination with a few other cards. Actually, like this one, the Greater Good. So, that said, Exploration might be worth a little bit more for archetype synergy than it would be just on raw power level in my cube. Then we have Deep Forest Hermit. I had Deranged Hermit in my cube, but I cut it for Deep Forest Hermit because I think they're both perfectly acceptable in graveyard strategies, like if your commander is Marin of Clan Niltoth, you like having a Deranged Hermit that gives you, it does everything you want, right? It gives you advantage on board, it puts itself in your graveyard to give you experience counters, and it can be returned to the battlefield, or to your hand, whatever, by Marin. But Deep Forest Hermit is also, I think, acceptable in a Marin deck, and better outside of it, because it sticks around a little bit. Oath of Nissa, it was the best cantrip in Standard for a while, from what I've heard. Basically, it's in here because it's an enchantment, and it is an acceptable filtering spell. Drana, Liberative Malakir. Unlike in 1v1, I don't think she's a particularly good aggressive card on her own, but what she does is she supports Marchesa, the Black Rose, who I have had someone draft, and when somebody drafts a commander or tries to put a deck together, it incentivizes me to add more cards that support that commander, so long as they're acceptable cards. This also, of course, can be an aggressive card, and I've tried to push Black Aggro in the past. At the moment, it's not as strong as it used to be. I've replaced it somewhat with Aristocrats, but we'll see. Drana keeps making it into people's decks, and as long as that keeps happening, I'm content to let her stay in the cube. Then we have Oracle of Muldaya. It is a powerful card. I don't rate it as highly as I think other people do, in part because it costs 4 mana. And I like to have as many 1 and 2 drops as possible so that I can cast more spells than my opponents. But and I don't think that it's more powerful than Windfall here. But yeah, it's a consideration. I've seen it do excellent work, as I suspect most people have. Then we have Sea of Clouds, the Battle Bond land that comes into play, essentially untapped all the time, but isn't fetchable. Rugged Prairie, which is a fine filtering land, but I'll note, because this is red, and I guess and in part because it's white, because it's a Boros land, I would expect this to wheel And even if it was plateau, I would expect it to wheel. People don't when we draft, people don't tend to go for the red lands very much, or into red in general. Then we have Muldrifter, acceptable card. Marin of Clan Neltoth, perfectly acceptable in the 99 if you're in green-black. And Greater Good, which is a card that I put in because I like it. It supports a few strategies particularly well. Notably, somebody put together a Yasova Dragonclaw deck in the early iterations of my cube, and they said Greater Good was a key card for that deck because it's a sack outlet that's available in mono green, right, without going into black. And since then, it hasn't seen very much play, but it has not been in people's sideboards enough that, which, to preface this, I'll say I do keep track of which cards people put in their sideboards. Sometimes I miss cards, but for the most part, I'm doing all right, and I have a link to that, I think, in my primer as well. Anyway, Greater Good hasn't been sideboarded enough yet that I feel like I have to cut it and replace it with something else. Alright, so out of this pack I will take Windfall. Pack 3, we've got Niv-Mizzet Perun. I think it's a powerful card if fairly hard to cast. Satyr Enchanter, which I put in to support the enchantments archetype. This probably should be Faber or Elder instead. We'll see how Satyr Enchanter does, but I'm thinking about making that replacement in my next cube update. Felwar Stone, colorless ramp spell that fixes as well. Totally great. Deadeye Navigator. I think this is a card that can do good work. I will note that I don't have any 2-card combos in my cube, which means that because I'm playing Deadeye Navigator, I won't add Palancron or what is it, Shrieking Drake, or the Drake, the popper card. Anyway, you know, there's nothing that will make you go infinite with Deadeye Navigator. It's basically just a powerful card for the blue-white blink archetype, which I've seen do some pretty strong things in my cube, especially with a payoff like Diluvian Primordial. Then we have Sign in Blood, one of the basically worst Night's Whisper, because it is very unusual to use the kill a target player mode of this card, but still an acceptable draw spell. Farseek, perfectly acceptable ramp spell. Krenko 10th Street Kingpin. He's I think this is a good point for me to stop and say I play a multitude of token makers in red because if I were to say just take random red cards that are strong-ish off of like the EDH rec website, which is more or less what I did when I first created this cube, that I wouldn't have a very good red section. Like, it would be playable, right? And you would see cards that you would think, okay, I could put that in a deck. But what I've tried to do with red is to say, okay, I'm going to take out mediocre to good, mediocre to acceptable red cards and put more support in for tokens specifically. Part of that is because Purphoros is a strong mono red commander. Part of it is because I think tokens is an archetype that red and white combined do that is the best archetype you can do if your commander is red and white. And I think Adriana is a useful commander for that. And then, you know, when you add other colors, then the tokens starts to get less good. But I have basically I'm supporting Naya tokens in my cube with some blue and some black token makers as well. So I run Krenko alongside Henweir Garrison and Goblin Rabblemaster, and I think we got a big one here. Henweir Garrison, Rabblemaster, yeah, in my red 3-drop section. So then we have Serra Ascendant. The question I get most often about this card is, isn't this too good? Right? 1 mana 6/6 just wins games. And in my experience, that's not true. Obviously, it's a powerful card on turn 1. But going back to what I was saying before about having 3 opponents, making up for somewhat low removal, I've seen Serra Ascendant hit play and beat people down, but I have not seen it dominate a game. Right? I haven't seen it single-handedly take someone out of the game. Usually it gets killed before that, or bounced, or you top deck it when you have less than 30 life, which happens often enough in my cube because, as I said before, I push aggressive strategies. So people tend to lose life. Not as fast as you would if you were playing 1v1 against a aggressive deck, but it happens. I myself have top decked this card when I've been at less than 30 life a number of times. I've also played it in the early turns and attacked with it, and that's pretty sweet. Yeah, as I said, I think this card is one of the top cards in white, but not game-breaking. So then we have Generous Gift, perfectly acceptable card. Agent of Acquisitions, one of, I think, the 2 Draft Matters cards I have in my cube, with the other being Cogwork Librarian. It's not in here for power level reasons so much as it is just for fun. I know people like playing with Draft Matters cards, so I'm willing to sacrifice a few mediocre card slots for cards that people are basically not going to put in their decks, but can make the draft better. I think the way to get ahead with Agent of Acquisitions is to take it after the wheel. When you, basically, when there's nothing, not as many cards left in the pack that you care about, and then to use it maybe before the wheel, or when you have a pack that looks like it's worth picks 1 through 8 in terms of power for your particular deck. And so for example, I wouldn't take Agent of Acquisitions over, I think, Farseek or Felwarstone or Serra Ascendant or Deadeye Navigator or Cascade Bluffs, which is a great fixer for blue-red, especially when you're playing cards like Niv-Mizzet. Although Niv-Mizzet is the only card that is quite this color intensive in the cube. So Torment of Hailfire is a totally acceptable finisher for black. And then we have Cryptghast, a ramp spell for black, helps you cast Torment of Hailfire. I have some support for mono black in my cube now. I've got cards like Gary, Cryptghast, Chainer, Dimension Master, Green Merchant of Asphodel. So I think Cryptghast is fine in a 2-color deck, or if you want to go mono black, more power to you. Anyway, it's another 4-mana card that I expect to add at least 2 mana to your pool. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead and take Serra Ascendant here. Alright, pack 3. We have Anger. One of my friends thinks this card is pretty fantastic. It is a very highly played red card on EDH Rec, so I have it in the cube, though I personally don't value it very highly. I could be wrong. Fetid Heath, I like black-white fixing, fine card. Body Double, as I said before, I don't have any 2-card infinites. I also don't have any Flash or Hulk in my cube, so this isn't, and I don't have Revelar combo, so this isn't going to go infinite with anything. It's just a 5-mana reanimate in blue that can be flickered, and I think it does that job just fine. Vona, Butcher, Magon. I think this card is worth its 5-mana cost because you get Vindicate every turn. Also has Lifelink, which not many cards in the cube do. Again, since I'm trying to push aggression, I've cut back on life gain a bit. So that said, I think attack for 4, pay 3 life to vindicate something every turn is strong. Plateau, as I said before, I expect this to wheel. Unspeakable Symbol. Another card that is basically just in here from Marchesa. This is even more narrow than what is it? The 2/3 flyer with first strike. But it also allows you to control your life total, which has some niche applications. Alright, Decimate. It's a 4 for 1. I myself cast it the other day to destroy I think it was a Rhystic Study and a Panharmonicon, a Goblin Rabblemaster, and someone's 3rd land. That's a fine card. I don't think I'm going to take it here, though, in part because it's gold, so I expect it to wheel. I think I just touched on this before, but about gold cards, the more gold cards you have in your cube, the more unplayable cards you have in your cube. Because, right, unless you ignore the color identity rule, which I think is a fine thing, perfectly acceptable thing to do for cubes. Right, if I go into Esper, Decimate is completely unplayable for me, even if I have multiple lands that can produce green and red mana. And the same goes for any guild card. And it's especially true for 3 color cards or more. From what I've heard, basically 3 color cards in an EDH cube are unplayable. So I don't think that how do I put it? So I don't have any 3 color cards in my cube, and I expect this card to wheel. Phyrexian Processor might be a card that I value higher than other players. I like that you can pay 4 mana, 8 mana, and make 6/6s or 8/8s without too much cost at all. Like I think if you can play this on turn 4 and pay 8 life, you're doing just fine. You're not. You'll be at 32-ish. It's not a hazardous life total, and then you can start popping out acceptably, appropriately sized bodies. Zealport Cutthroat. Again, I don't have infinite sack outlet combos, but this is a powerful card when paired with a commander like Prosh. Gaunty Lord of Luxury. Card I added recently because the way I see it, the stats are terrible. It's a purely defensive card with the Death Touch and the Value ability. It's a popular card, so I felt like my cube was doing acceptably well on being aggressive, and I was willing to add a purely defensive card in here. Angie's Ravager, not maybe the most powerful card in the world, and I'll note that I don't have a critical mass of madness cards, so I'm not specifically supporting an Angie deck, but the fact that it allows you to draw 3 cards for 3 mana, and then possibly more, in a color that doesn't have access to very many, if any, good card draw, is I think what makes this card worth putting into the cube. And honestly, it's still in testing. We'll see how it does. And then Increasing Devotion. Create 5 tokens. I have a card. I have the Angel. I want to call it the Angel Enchantment in my cube. Where is it here? Divine Visitation. Right. So I have seen someone do Divine Visitation into the Increasing Devotion, make 5 4/4s with Vigilance, and dominate the game. I think I've seen that a couple times actually. So Increasing Devotion, and even if you don't have Divine Visitation, this synergizes with red and white token strategies. So it's an acceptable card, but I'm not going to take it over, I think, Phyrexian Processor or just a fixing land like Fetid Heath. Alright, so I think this pack is immediately stronger than the previous pack because we have Victimize and Perforos at the front. I think I said this before, but the Reanimate strategy archetype hasn't been heavily drafted in my cube. there's at least one person who has done it successfully basically every time he drafts, because people, myself included, leave it open for him. But yeah, that said, Victimize is still a fine card. Perforos is one of the better cards in the red section. I value this card highly when I know that I'm in a Jund token deck. The other day I was looking to pick up a Perforos because of exactly that reason, and I ended up getting a Smothering Tithe instead, and then went into a different direction, essentially playing 4 colors. But if I had gotten the Perforos, I think that would have made me go back down to 3. Anyway, I would go into red for Perforos, I think. Beast Within, fine card. Edric, fine card. Sword of the Animist. This card has actually impressed me. Because of the cheap-ish cost, you can play and equip it on turn 4, and because of the ramp. If you can make, any kind of cheap creature, which my cube is set up to do, then this card allows you to get ahead on mana, which is one of the more important things to do in EDH, and I like it. Doubling Season, it's a powerful card. Everyone's aware of that, and I just want to note that I don't specifically support +1/+1 counters in my cube. Obviously it works with Planeswalkers, which is pretty cool. I don't know if that matters so much. Where are my Planeswalkers? Here we go. Ah, yes. A card like Elspeth definitely benefits from that. So, it has a high ceiling, but mostly it's in here as a token enabler. Survival of the Fittest. I think I value this card above Perforos, and in fact anything else that I've seen so far. It is one of a few number of tutors I have in my cube, because I think the principle of tutors, getting the card that you need being better than getting card advantage in EDH, carries over to EDH cube, even though we are using a lower number of cards, right, 50 card decks. And I still think it's quite strong. And the people in my play group don't enjoy tutors very much, so I've cut down on them. So I've got Enlightened Tutor, Mystical Tutor, Vampiric Tutor, Worldly Tutor, and then Survival of the Fittest and Fauna Shaman in green. And then in white, I also have Thalia's Lancers as basically a useful tutor for white, trying to bump up the power of that color a little bit. So Wretched Confluence, acceptable card. Acceptable card draw spell, especially. Savannah, good card, I like. Prairie Stream, perfectly acceptable. Fetchable, notably, is the reason that's included in the cube. And then Arbor Elf. I consider green to be open if I see a 1-mana dork around pick 5, which this is. So I'd say green is open. But I think I'm going to take Survival over the Arbor Elf here, and over anything else in this pack. Okay. So looking at this pack, Ashnod's Altar, it's a card I cut. I actually had it when I first created the cube, and then cut it to remove the infinite combos with my Chaos the Unhallowed. But I recently decided that was too much trouble and removed my Chaos the Unhallowed and put Ashnod's Altar back in. It helps support aristocrats and token strategies, and I think everybody's familiar with this card. Vindicate, a fine 1-for-1. I will note that in my cube there's a lot of powerful enchantments that are worth destroying, especially since I added the enchantment package, but like we already saw the Divine Visitation, for example, and that I think makes Vindicate hold its own in the gold section. Return to Dust, Similar effect, but it can't kill creatures. Right, everybody knows this card. Impact Tremors, another payoff for red tokens. It's particularly potent with Prosh. Malicious Affliction, fine card. Gilded Rake, I think, is the most powerful card that I've named in this pack. So I think everyone's played against a Gilded Rake, but if you haven't, in EDH specifically, a 3/3 flyer is, I think, essentially nothing. And in exchange, you get to get your opponent's best creature. Get the best creature on the board with Gilded Rake. So that is a very powerful cheat, especially at 2 mana, being very cheap mind control effect. Grand Abolisher. It's a highly played card on EDH Rec, but I don't think it's particularly good in my cube for its effect. That said, like I said, I keep track of which cards end up in sideboards when this card has been sideboarded enough, or when I am particularly passionate about a new 2-drop, I'll replace it. Zendikar Resurgent, it's a payoff for the ramp decks. Also feeds into the X spells like Hail of Torment that we saw earlier, or Torment of Hailfire, sorry. Apprentice Necromancer, this might be a card that I like more than other people do, at least for casual EDH. But yeah, I love the cheap reanimation effect that it provides. And then here's the aforementioned Thales Lancers. A 4/4 first striker has acceptable stats for combat, if not for damaging the opponent. And mostly it's in here because it's tutors for planeswalkers and legendary cards, which are, you know, I have quite a few legendaries, like, for example, Elish Norn in my cube, and and it supports the blue-white blink archetype as well, or it's an enabler for blue-white blink. So I'm going to take the Gilded Rake here. All right. So looking at this pack, we have our 1-for-1 perfectly acceptable counterspell. We have our Seal Away, which is in the cube primarily because it has flash, and that's a useful ability for a multiplayer game. Kestic Wolfrun gives trample. That's a form of evasion. That's basically what it does. Detention Sphere. It's Detention Sphere. Yawgmoth is a somewhat recent addition. I haven't seen him in play too much, and I haven't seen the Aristocrats in archetype be played too much. So I might swap him out at some point, but we'll see. And then Martial Coup. So this is the first Wrath effect we've seen. And there, in fact, are not very many Wrath effects in my cube, because I've got 2 in white, 1 in red, 1 in black, and then 1 colorless. Is that all? Suffice to say, I have around 5 in my 480 card cube, and that's because too many Wrath effects makes it difficult for creature combat based decks to function. Like, I think everybody's familiar with the saying that, like, in EDH you expect a Wrath to be played on turn 5 and then every 3 turns thereafter. And that just makes it so that if your game plan is to play vanilla 5/5s, you are going to struggle, because you're going to get Wrathed over and over and over. So, right, I cut down on that effect in my cube. That, as a side effect, Wraths are high picks. So this is looking like a powerful pick for this pack. Then we have Taiga, perfectly acceptable land. Though again, it is red, so I kind of expect this to wheel. Wait, there's it would be the last card in the pack. I guess I don't expect this to be the last card in the pack. Yeah, I don't expect this to be taken particularly highly. We have a Miryafa Sheppard. Her stats are abysmal-ish. Being a 4/4 flyer for 7 mana is not what I want to see. That said, she rewards you for playing planes, and She's a recent addition that basically I'm testing to see if she makes white better. We'll see how she does. She's also, of course, a very highly played card on EDH Rake. And then Howling Mine, basically in here as a card advantage engine for decks that need it. Not the most powerful colorless card. So yeah, I'm going to take Martial Coup. Bam. So, another powerful pack. Going through in order, Coiling Oracle has the main strength of costing 2 mana and being a cheap ramp spell, or card draw spell. Terracodon, another ramp payoff. Clockwork Librarian. Right, the strength of this card is that you can take it after picks 1 or 2, and then next pack you can get 2 first pick quality cards. That said, this pack also contains a Necropotence, which I consider to be a first pick quality card on its own, and a card that I would take over Clockwork Librarian. Anointed Procession, good token enabler, supports white tokens. Cathar's Crusade, here's the payoff for the tokens in white, or one of the payoffs. One of the cards I consider to be worth, making it worth going to tokens, right? And then we have Hero of Bladehold, which I think is a solid, good creature. 4 toughness, has, at least in regular EDH, has proven to be relevant, and it is 7 power when it attacks the first time, and then presumably more after that. So, passes my 6/6 test. And then Selfless Squire, which is not the strongest card, I don't think. It is kind of a funny card. It supports the blue-white blink archetype. I've had to face down Mistmeta Witch plus Selfless Squire in the past, which is a powerful combo in the sense of essentially preventing all damage from one player per round, unless you have tons and tons of mana, but not an unbeatable combo, because there is, excuse me, sorry, right, essentially you just need to two for one yourself, or have 2 people use a removal spell, 1 at instant speed to kill it. That said, you know, it has seen play. 4 mana, flash, save yourself some damage, and make a body has been an acceptable effect, and I haven't been displeased with it, but I wouldn't take it for sure over either of these cards. And I like card draw more than I like a token payoff, so I will take Necropotence. And just to, you know, I'll come back to this later. So we're back to pick 1, the first pack we opened. I think that the most powerful cards in here are Nezahal and Pongify, but I like the fixing that Evolving Wilds provides, given that I have drafted 4 colors of cards so far, so I'm going to be taking that here. Here we're back to pick 2. Given what I have so far, I think Sea of Clouds, just taking the fixing is great here. And then we're back here. I think both of these cards would be acceptable, perfectly acceptable in my deck, but I'm going to take the Agent because it is late. It's around the time that I like picking up an Agent of Acquisitions. Given what I have so far, I like Vona just as a mid-rangey threat or removal spell. While the page is loading, I can look back over the picks I've taken. Hopefully the page finishes loading at some point. This is not looking great. Alright, there we go. Alright, so we have removal, essentially card draw, card draw. I'm going to take the Edric because I have a couple of evasive threats, and I think he'll be worth it. Also, he's one of the 2 cheaper cards in that pack. I don't particularly care for Grand Abolisher with what I've got going on, so I'll take Return to Dust, and then the 15th pick. Alright. So looking over the cards I've got so far, I think I have a solid start to a draft. I've got some card advantage, tutoring, which I like, a removal spell, a powerful threat, and then some cards that are just fine, and some fixing. If I do the same thing over the next 4 packs, the next 3 packs, I mean, I'll end up with 16 lands that I can play, which is totally fine. Normally decks in my cube, being 50 cards, have 20 lands and 30 spells. And I will have some good cards here. If I were to pick a commander based on what I've drafted right now, I'd want a 4-color commander, black, white, blue, green, which says Tymna and Thrasios to me. Alright. And maybe this is a good time to say I do like sticking to 4 colors at the most, if I can, because while there are strong 5-color commanders, you know, Kenrith the Returned King, the First Sliver, Niv-Mizzet, you name it, right? There's good commanders that cost that have 5 colors in them. I think the partner commanders, specifically Tymna, Thrasios, are powerful enough that they reward you for sticking to 4 colors if you can. And then, of course, there's Vile Smasher, Tana, and various and sundry other commanders. But I do think that Tymna is the best commander in regular EDH when combined with a partner. A 4-color Super Phyrexian Arena that itself can... yeah, essentially a 4-color Super Phyrexian Arena. I think makes it the strongest commander. So I like to aim for a deck that can play Tymna, unless I am well, if I see that it's open, right? So let's look at this pack. Force of Will, powerful, free counterspell. Yawgmoth's Will. Essentially, in this cube, it's not a Storm Enabler so much as it is a double regrowth. To that end, it's a good card. But I like Force of Will better from what I was seeing here. And of course, there's also this tension, right, where Force of Will kind of wants me to be in fewer colors than 4. So far I have 1, 2, 3 cards that I could conceivably pitch to it out of my 15 picks. So it might not actually be a worse card for me specifically, but we'll see. Gamble, it's a tutor. Some people like it. I think it's... I don't really like playing it, personally. But, yeah. Insult to Injury. This is one of those more mediocre cards that I was talking about, but the fact that it doubles damage has been relevant for me. It has made me go from well, essentially it has won me a game in the sense that it was the last spell cast. I had a board state, and then casting Insult gave me a winning board state. And then Injury, right, deals some damage. Shocks the creature, whatever. Not the worst card in the world, but certainly not a card I'm going to be taking over some of the other cards I see here. Baleful Strix, blue-black, evasive, draws a card. Everybody knows it. I don't have Tinker in my cube. I think Tinker's banned in EDH, but anyway, it's still, I think, worth playing based on the strength of being a 2-drop, primarily. Henry Garrison, red token card. Magmatic Insight, a card I recently added and basically am testing. I think it is the kind of card you want if you are trying to be mono-red and draw cards. Discard a dead card, draw 2 new ones. Or be blue-red, Spellslinger, and dig through your deck and get a lot of instants and sorceries, prowess triggers off in one turn. Okay, land tax, a fine card, a very powerful card in a slow cube and even in a normal cube. In my cube, I sometimes wonder if this card is actually too weak because you don't always have the number of triggers you want off of this. But that said, it's EDH. Basically, if you play land tax, you're going to be drawing 3 lands or to 6 lands plus out of your deck. So I'm not going to say anything crazy like I think it's a bad card. I don't. I think it is a good card and probably worth going into white for. Karmic Guide. As I said, I don't have Revel Arc. I do have Karmic Guide because a 5 mana Reanimate is fine, and getting a 2/2 with it as well with protection is it's a thing. Also works with the blue-white blink archetype, provided you can blink it before paying its echo cost. Wormcoil Engine. Some people like this card a lot. I give it the status of being an acceptable body, whereas in 1v1 it is a humongous bomb. In EDH, I think it is acceptable. Diluvian Primordial, by contrast, is definitely a bomb. Just to name one instance, I was playing a cube match where somebody cast Diluvian Primordial and then cast Army of the Damned. No. What is this? What is this? Rise of the Dark Realms from an opponent's graveyard. And shortly thereafter won, because they controlled a humongous board state of creatures. Also notable that it goes in the blue-white blink archetype pretty well, but this is one of those S-class cards that I would take, regardless of what else was going on. Burnished Heart. It's not my favorite ramp spell, but it's colorless. Xenagos, a card I personally like a lot. It's definitely better in a token deck than in yield average deck. And then we have Fauna Shaman, another tutor, a body, great card, and Marsh Flats, which notably, right, unlike say Fetid Heath, this is a colorless land, so that in addition to providing a shuffle effect, it goes into any deck. You can play it right with the Commander Identity rule. I don't think I need to convince anyone that fetch lands are good, but I will say I consider this to be pack one, pick one double. That said, what's my ranking here? I think I rank Diluvian Primordial first, then Marsh Flats, then Force of Will, then Yawgmoth's Will, then the rest of the cards. So I'm just going to take this Primordial. Be pretty happy with that. Alright, Rhystic Study. Pretty good card. Dragon Master Outcast. This card hasn't really proven itself, I don't think. But it is a 1-drop, and it hasn't been in the sideboard enough times for me to justify taking it out. So it remains in. It has potential. Balefire Dragon. This is one of those red 6+ drops I was talking about that is worth playing. I love it particularly in a Maelstrom Wanderer deck. It fails the Terminate test and the Vindicate test, but it is very aggressive. And it does one-sided wraths. Bloom Tender, a fine ramp spell, especially if you're gold. Gratuitous Violence. This is probably the second heaviest mana requirement after Niv Mizzet. But people play it, and I think they're right to do so. I think one-sided damage doublers are strong. So this is in the cube. Chain of Vapor. I love this spell, and well, I will put it in any blue deck. But I'm probably not going to take it here because of these other cards I'm seeing. Wasteland. I don't think this card is as good. I don't think this card is nearly as good in EDH as it is in 1v1. To start with, assuming for the sake of argument that you wanted to waste all your opponent's resources, you need to do 3 times as much work in EDH compared to 1v1. So even if you have a Crucible, you need to also have an Azusa in order to even keep your opponents off of 1 land. And I don't have Azusa in my cube, so if you wanted to try that, you'd have to pick Azusa as your commander. I don't think Azusa is worth putting in the cube in the 99. So basically, this is only here for decks to be able to answer problematic lands, like the Kestig Wolfrun, for example, or probably a better example in this particular cube is the flipped version of one of the cards that, you know what, I'm just going to look at it if I can. There we go. The flipped version, Itlamok, Cradle of the Sun, which taps for green for every creature you control. Okay. Avenger Zendikar, it's a win con. It's a good card. Cleansing Nova is another Wrath. I have this in here over Wrath of God because of the flexibility. And in part because of the Command Zone podcast that talked about this being better than Wrath of God. It's slightly more expensive, but it has, I think, proven itself. Tundra, great card. Ilharg the Raised Boar, another great... no, wait, no, I was thinking of something else. Ilharg, I think he's fine. Some people like him a lot more than I do. Obviously, he represents a threat, but I don't... as I said before, my average converted mana cost in my cube is 3.5. There's not too many things that you can put into play with Ilharg that that are really, really scary. Craterhoof would definitely be one, though. I've seen people put Terrastodon and play with Ilharg, and that's pretty great. Especially because you can keep doing it over and over. But I don't think it's the best card in this pack, or close to it. Seal of Primordium, which is basically there for the enchantment deck. It's a removal spell. Pathbreaker Ibex, this is a card I will go into green for. I think it's one of the best cards in the green section. I don't see it too terribly much in EDH, actually. But I think this is one of the cards that can take you from having a board state to killing multiple players. In other words, it's a win con, and I value win cons higher than normal in EDH relative to 1v1 because of the selfish nature, the selfish win strategy. If you want to see more about that, you can Google Y combo, or you can look for the link on my primer. And then we have Eldrazi Monument, which doesn't see as much play, but I think it's another payoff for the token strategy. So given what I have, I don't see any S-class cards here, which, although Avenger is a win con, Balefire Dragon is great, Rhystic Study is powerful, Cleansing Nova, of course. I think I want Tundra the most, so I'm going to take that. Alright. I'm going to take the Craterhoof out of this pack, and I'm not going to feel too bad about it. I think that Craterhoof is the best card in my cube, and it requires some setup, but the payoff is there. And because I have Craterhoof, now I'm going to probably focus more on cheap ramp creatures, which out of this pack I see Elves of Deep Shadow and City of Brass as being contentions, and I'm just going to take the Elves. Elves also works with Windfall, of course. Yeah, and the Survival of the Fittest helps me find the hoof, and basically at this point I'm pretty set on playing green and blue, and probably white and black as well. I think that having Tymna in the command zone is a good way to get ahead, and Thrasios just makes sense to go with that. I like Sepulchral Primordial. I think it scrapes over the line of being a win con. And I've done some pretty silly things with it. Seedborn Muse is a powerful card normally. I have a Leyline of Anticipation and a Vedalken Orrery in my cube, which of course this goes nuts with. But in the average deck, it doesn't do very much, I don't think. So I'm going to take Primordial over that. Path of Ancestry, a good choice as well. Actually, given that I already have Diluvian Crater Roof, maybe I want Path of Ancestry more than Sepulchral. Because I do need the fixing. Yeah, so I'm just going to take that. Consuming Aberration, it's a powerful card. Talisman of Conviction, I probably won't go into red for this, especially because, as I said, I like to stay 4 colors if I can. Liliana, she makes 2/2s, she draws cards, that's fine. Chrome, oh, also another payoff for the Aristocrats archetype. This one has seen more play than the other cards, but has also been in the cube for a little bit longer than the other cards. Chrome is sort of a placeholder / test card. I don't, if I were to replace him with anything, it would probably be Prophetic Bolt, but I'm not particularly excited about Prophetic Bolt in this cube. So Chrome is sticking around for a bit, at least until he's in sideboards enough to cut him. Ransack the Lab, fine card draw spell, Ash Barrens. Basically the worst fixing land that I have in my cube, but it is a fixing land. Fibblethip draws a card. Guardian Project, another card that I recently added to support the Enchantress archetype. I haven't very much experience with it, but I don't think I'm taking it here. Given my game plan, I might take Fibblethip or Ransack, or I might just take Consuming Aberration for the raw power. Brainstorm is a good card, but you do need the shuffle effects to support it. And actually, I've got a survival. I've got some shuffle effects. I don't normally, yeah, Evolving Wilds and survival. I don't normally take Brainstorm very highly, but this might be the time to take it. And then, of course, Capsize. I don't personally play with this card very much. My cube is fairly fast, especially it's very fast by EDH standards, with most games ending around turn 8. So there's not a lot of time for a Capsize lock to be set up. But that said, this is a payoff for Seedborn Muse, which I just passed. I'm just going to pass this as well, and I'm going to take Brainstorm. Alright, Benevolent Offering. This is probably one of the worst cards in white, but it makes tokens, so it supports the tokens archetype. Neheb the Eternal, I like this card. Reigns of Power, I have been brought around on this card. A friend of mine who's quite good at drafting really loves Reigns of Power. At worst, it's a fog, and that is admittedly bad, but at best, you take the best board state and kill somebody. So it's a versatile, powerful card. Rakdos Carnarium, I have an incomplete cycle of Karus, meaning this is the only one in the cube, and it's here because red-black needs the card advantage. Thrill of Possibility, card draw spell for red, if you need one. Horizon Canopy, powerful card, excuse me. Doom Whisperer is a card that I like. I think it meets my stats test at being a 6/6 Flying Traveler. I like the surveil ability, I like everything about it. Probably not going to take it over Godless Shrine or Reigns of Power. Krenko is a card that I think other people value a little higher than I do, but of course I think it's one of the most powerful cards in red. So I'm just going to take Reigns of Power here. And then we get, oh, okay. Skyscanner is here mostly to support Tymna-based strategies, to be a colorless card that draws a card. You know, it's a Skyscanner. It's not the best card in the world, but it's serviceable. Flickering Ward is here specifically for the Enchantress archetype. If Tuvasa the Sunlit is your commander, you can cast this every turn to draw a card. also gives protection, so if you want to Voltron up your team, sorry, not your team, Voltron up, say, your commander, again, like Tuvasa, there you go. Caustic Caterpillar is in here primarily because it's cheap. It also works with Marin and graveyard strategies. Elish Norn, she is a win con, and I like her. And given that I'm trying to go with a creature-based strategy, I'm probably going to take her. Progenitor Mimic can be very powerful. I've seen it perform well. I've also seen it do very little. I think it's the second best card here after Elish Norn. The Akroan War, I added it recently. It threatens for longer than a turn, which I like. We'll see how it pans out. Soul Warden, somebody suggested I add this for the white token strategies. It's probably the 70. It's probably number 70 through 75 of my 60 through 63 of my 63 white cards. In terms of how good it is, we'll see. Azra Ozmaker, this card has proven itself to me. I think I like it, but I am going to take the Elish Norn here. I would consider Azra Ozmaker if I was in both red and black already. Alright, we're back here. I'll take the Fauna Shaman as a cheap creature and tutor. Cleansing Nova. Absent Pilgrim. Odric makes your team unblockable. And that might be better than, I think that might be better than Myriad Landscape, especially given what I've got going on. True Conviction, that card's cool. But I think I want the, given that I'm planning at this point to be playing Tymna and Thrasios, I think I want Spectral Procession just to make evasive creatures that can attack. Right, this by itself allows you to draw 3 cards a turn off Tymna. I think that's worth more than True Conviction. Well, hello, Consuming Aberration. Benevolent Offering. Alright. Once upon a time, if it's banned, it might make it into my cube. We'll see how this card works. Actually, it might be good for my deck because of, again, these specific powerful cards. But I don't think it's better than the Warmonger. Free spells are great. If the Warmonger does nothing more than allow me to play a Mana Dork and activate it on the same turn, that's still more than 0. And it takes 0 card slots in the deck, so I'll take the Warmonger. Alright, what do we got? I love a Mystic Murmora. I will put this in every deck that I can. I might want Bayou for the fixing more than that. Hatred, I'll just point out, is in here primarily because a few people really like it. And it's good for black aggro. It synergizes with Whip of Erebos. You know, it does a few things. It's not the greatest card in the world. It's fairly niche, but well, again, it hasn't been in sideboards enough for me to cut it yet, so it stays in for now. And the people who love it really love it, so if I can make them happy, that makes me happy. Anyway, I think it's between Bayou and Shaman, given what I'm doing in this deck, so I'm going to take Bayou. Alright, we have Sword of Light and Shadow. Has fine protections. I don't particularly like Lyra in EDH, because, or Baneslayer for that matter, because again, I don't think the stats are relevant. It does have lifelink, it does have first strike and flying. Those are all fine qualities. I just don't rate it. You know, it is in my cube, which means that it has passed a certain threshold of power. I just don't think it's one of the most powerful cards in my cube. Like, I would probably consider Cast Out before Lyra. New edition Nightmare Sheppard. Underworld Breach, another new edition. That and Rise of the Dark Realms are both fairly powerful spells. I'm actually considering Thief of Sanity because it is a cheap, evasive threat that can trigger Tymna, and it draws cards on its own, as well as Crystalline Crawler because it is a ramp spell. So and also a color fixer. So I think also this is pack 3. I think I'll just take the Crawler. Alright, what do we got here? We have great mind control, the aforementioned whip. This is in here primarily for the card draw / looting ability and the blink ability. Eternalize is not nothing. So, Courser is a fine card. Could always reach, good ramp card. Overgrowth, good ramp card. I might like Could Always Reach better than Overgrowth, just because I like lands better than, pulling lands out of my deck better than straight ramp. I think both of those are probably better than Incubation Druid, but maybe not, especially in my deck. And here's Leyline of Anticipation. Let me talk about Curse of Opulence real quick, though. Whenever enchanted players attacked, create a colorless artifact token named Gold. You could also call it Treasure or Lotus Petal, doesn't matter. The point is, this is a red ramp spell. It sucks to be cursed. I'm usually the one cursed. A player can curse themselves if they like tech. But anyway, I think it helps make red a little better. I'm going to take the Leyline here. Although I might not play it. And I'm going to take the Luminarch Ascension here, which is, I think, the best white card in the cube. Alright. We have some powerful cards here. Abhorrent Overlord is a card I added recently, basically as a mono black payoff. I like the effect that it has when you have, an average number of devotion. We'll see how it does. Given what I have in my strategy, I'm inclined to take Dreamscape Artist for the ramp, or Reflecting Pool for the fixing, quote-unquote fixing. Mirror Entity as a redundant win con, or Explosive Vegetation for the ramp. And I'm not 100% sure which is the best. I'm primarily inclined to take one of these two cards because they're cheap. Dragonlord Silumgar is obviously a powerful card, but somewhat expensive. And you can see, like, my mindset here is to be playing cards on turn 1 and turn 2, not waiting and then having, like, Cultivate be the first spell that I cast in a game. Which is part of what leads to the quick games in my cube. So I'm going to do Explosive Vegetation. What's my card? Got Necropotence as well. Yeah, I'll take Reflecting Pool. Here's Worldly Tutor. Great card. We have some other great cards here. Shelmano's Blessing is probably the most parasitic Enchantress card in my cube. I added it basically because I needed a certain threshold of enchantments for critical mass. It is a instant speed protection from a color. That's it. I expect it to only see play in a Tuvasa deck. We'll see what happens with that. And I'm going to take the Worldly Tutor here. Alright, so we have Mother of Runes and Aunt of Runes. We have Mana Fixing, which I do love, especially because I don't think I have a blue-black land yet. Although I also don't have any fetches, so that might not matter so much. But I'm just going to take Sunken Hollow here. I'd probably take Mother of Runes after the Sunken Hollow. And I'll take the Forbidden Orchard here. I don't see anything I love here. I could hate draft Reforge the Soul because I think it is a powerful card, but I'm probably just going to take the Mirage Mirror on the off chance that I play it. Okay, well I'm going to take Thief of Sanity here. I don't care about Mirari's Wake too terribly much. I could hate draft Magus of the Wheel. It's a wheel. It's powerful. I'll just take Mirari's Wake. I added this recently. We'll see how it does. I don't think it's as powerful as the other Odric. But that said, I'm somewhat low on creatures. So I might want it just for that. I do have another pack after this, which is worth noting. But there again, I don't I don't know. The alternative is Grizzly Salvage. The fact that it looks at the top 5 cards of my library is what draws me to it. Gets a creature, a land. Yeah, I'll take the order. I think I will. Get another creature. I'll hate draft Nahiri. There we go. Alright, what do we got here? As I was GT, I've found it to be perfectly acceptable, primarily for the -1/-1 ability. Temple of the False God. This is a card a lot of other people rate much higher than I do. I will basically never play this card. But it's in the cube because it is a, I mean, it's basically in every deck on EDH Rec. And I let other people play it, and I don't take it myself, and I'm pretty happy with that situation. Tempt with Vengeance, pretty fine. Red token payoff. Morphic Pool, I like it. Temple Garden, I probably want this the most out of the cards here because it fixes green, which I don't have very many. But there's a Fintorn Elves and a Stoneforge Mystic. I would probably take Stoneforge Mystic higher had I taken any equipment so far, or if I saw it earlier in the draft. I don't really want it at this point. I'm probably going to cut Kiora's Follower soon because of adding Kiki Jiki. And there's other blue-green cards that are worth playing, but I like Kiora's Follower. 2 mana, ramp spell / untap something. Totally fine. So the real question here is, do I take Fintorn Elves or one of these 2 lands? And I think because I'm low on creatures, I take the Fintorn Elves. What do we got here? Well, I like Mana Confluence the best of all these cards. Yes, I do. Because I feel like I need the fixing. I've got 12, 10, basically I've got 11 fixing, oh, that's counting Warmonger as a non-basic land for some reason. I've got 10 fixing lands. I might not need the fixing too terribly much, but I'm not going to be playing Inferno Titan. I don't really care to play Kokosho. I don't really care to play Sun Titan. I don't think I need any of these cards. I would like Chart a Course, because I like the card draw. I don't particularly care for Bastion Protector. This might seem like an odd card. I added it back when I was adding more Voltron cards in white, which I have since mostly removed, but people have put Bastion Protector in their decks, and so until I find a straight up better 3-drop, Bastion Protector stays in the cube. And I'm going to take the Mana Confluence. Hello, Damnation. I'm seeing a lot of powerful non-creatures and not a lot of creatures. Makes me wonder what exactly is going on. Damnation and Oblivion Stone are both first pickable cards, but of course we're in pack 4. I think I want the Awakening Zone for the ramp and the fact that it makes creatures. What have we got here? We have some cards. I'm inclined to take Twilight Mire for the green and the black. Actually, because I have Necropotence and this produces double black, I'm more inclined to take Twilight Mire. I think the card fighting it is Dark Confidant, which is a powerful card, especially when I have a low curve like I do. I don't mind flipping a Critter Hoof Behemoth to Dark Confidant if it immediately wins me the game. But I am going to take the Disciplined Twilight Mire here. Alright. Then we have some powerful cards here. Powerful Removal Spell, Mystical Tutor, Powerful Wrath. Oh, we're seeing all the Wraths. The bots are not taking them very highly. I don't like White Sun Zenith myself very much, but I have seen it do some good work, especially when combined with the aforementioned Itlamok, Cradle of the Sun. So I think it has proven itself if it is, maybe in the middle of the pack as far as white cards go. I'm inclined to take either Bolas' Citadel or Ulvenwald Hydra here. I don't know which is better. Like I do want creatures for my deck, and I like the Ulvenwald Hydra as a ramp spell. I kind of think that Bolas' Citadel has to be the pick. Powerful card. Alright. Here we have Beastmaster Ascension, which I think outclasses every other card in this pack, whether it's pack 1 or pack 4. Well, I mean, because I'm in the Craterhoof sort of deck, obviously Beastmaster Ascension gets better, so I'm going to take that. This card is primarily here for a black-white token deck. I think Springbloom Druid and Looter Elcor are the choices here. And I'm going to take Looter because it's cheaper and draws cards. I like Exotic Orchard. I also like Submerge because it is basically always free and it is a 1-for-1. I think I want more fixing more than I want more spells. So Exotic Orchard it is. This card is kind of in here just for the Reanimate deck. I added it somewhat recently. We're testing it out. We'll see how well it does. In the meantime, I want this Silent Clearing. And now I think I will take this Sun Titan. And this Oblivion Stone, maybe? Knight of the White Orchid would not be a terrible pick for me. I have fixing, so I could probably reliably cast it. I don't have any land fetching ramp spells, so I'm probably not going to be ahead on lands unless I cast this. And it's a body for Craterhoof and Beastmaster Ascension and so on. And I want, let's see, of my 30 spells, 19 creatures is probably a good amount. I might actually not need that. I might actually need Oblivion Stone. Well, it's probably worth just cutting Oblivion Stone at this point. I'll take Wonder for the evasion, Dovin's Veto because I can cast it. I don't know if this matters too terribly much. Let's take Ojutai, Twin Flame. Alright. So let's look what we got here. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so I'm going to make cuts from this. So I'm going to cut this because it won't be in the main deck, but it will be on the battlefield. All of these lands, I'm just going to put them in the sideboard for the moment, and I'll bring them back later. Now we have all of these. Red cards are not going to be played. Agent of Acquisitions. I probably should have used that agent at some point. I didn't even think about it. But that's fine. Let's see here. Do I like all these creatures? How many cards do we have here? 41 cards? Okay, so we need to cut 11. And I will happily cut Mary's Wake, Return to Dust, Benevolent Offering, Oblivion Stone, Mirage Mirror, Shamana's Blessing. I could be making the wrong cuts, but that's fine. I'm going to, after this, I'm going to create another video where I test this deck out against some players. Maybe I want Dragonlord Ojutai because of the Anticipate ability. Maybe I want it more than Consuming Aberration. I like Vona. I don't care about this guy so much. I like all of these. So I think I'm going to cut 3 non-creature spells. I'll cut Ley 9. I never feel like I need that card, and I think it's down to either Dovin's Veto or Bolas' Citadel as the cut. Possibly Brainstorm. So I'm just going to cut the more expensive card. Or maybe I won't. It'll do like that, so that, because I haven't actually played with Bulbous Citadel in any of my decks yet, it's probably worth casting. Alright, that gives me 31 cards. Well, I've got 3 dorks, so that fits. I can cut 1 land. Let's go Silent Clearing, Exotic Orchard, Twilight, Cool. And then I need 5 more lands, which can be basics. I'll sort that out later. I'll just save this. And that will finish up this video. In the next video, I'm going to I'm going to export this, and then I'm going to test out the deck.